You know what? I didn't have my mic turned on. Aha! We're gonna back up. We're gonna beep 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 beep. Back the truck up. I'll see you folks in a minute. Might as well just start that one over. Do 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 do. And nothing like a part two. This is one of the reasons why I like having the back and forth. I like having the chat going when I'm recording feedback clip, because 9 times out of 10, if there is an issue, you'll spot it before I spot it, because I obviously am recording. And now you can see that there's an audio meter, and it's going off, and I can see that it's going off, and that means that we have audio this time. So without further ado, let's jump right on into the feedback loop. This morning we've got a number of projects to look at. The first thing we're going to look at here is a little work I've been doing with Melanie. She's obviously working through her. It might be obvious to you if you've been following along. Melanie's working through updating her portfolio. This is her Handy project, and got a lot of really great work here with Handy. And as we come through, she's got this component here that's used over and over and over again for her testing. So she has the control unit and the test unit, and this shape here that she's created is really actually pretty easy to pull off in CSS Grid. So if we come over here and look at this in CSS Grid, we've got this. It's a section that's wrapping a couple of divs, and one side is the info, the other side is the images. And this section, if we come down to the CSS, this section is it's this display grid. It's got a gap on it, which you can see there. It says grid template columns 1FR. Well, this is built mobile first, so as we come down, it's first in a mobile design, and then it augments itself with a media query down here to give you the 1FR, 2FR. So really the main goal here in working with Melanie on this was to give her basically a starting point, because she's just getting back into code, and she hasn't taken a lot of time with code in recent projects. So trying to get her reacclimated, and I got a little extra space right there. But the real thing that I'm always looking out for on situations like this is how do we get in here and add some nuance to these shadows? I'm not a huge shadow fan, but if we're going to use a shadow, I definitely want to come in and do so with a very light touch. And there's a lot of ways that you can write the box shadow property onto a element, but I prefer to work with this X. So this is X, Y, and then the amount of spread on that shadow, or the I want to say that's blur. If I said 1, that gets that gets a lot smaller. If I said 100, it like bursts out, and now you can see like the shadow is going all the way down there. So I'm going to leave that at 10, but it also comes down to this RGBA. The A is the alpha channel. So if I said 9, that gets really dark. If I said 5, there you go. I'm leaving it at 1. And the reason I'm leaving it at 1 is very simply because I want to make sure that whatever is showing up behind this image or behind this box is very subtle. This is decoration. This is not function. So that's one of the reasons why I want to make it very subtle. Something else I want to do here is on on this UL here, I've got a very tall line height. And that tall line height works well for individual lines, but it doesn't work so well here when the line breaks. It actually looks like there's more space here than there are between the individual lines. So I'm going to pull that back, and instead of putting a lot of space between the individual lines, I'm going to come back and write a little margin bottom on each LI, and I'm going to say 1 rem. And that now allows these elements to group together a little more. If you wanted more line height, you could have that. But this is definitely a better version of that principle than we had before. And I'm trying to figure out why YouTube has. It looks like YouTube has not reposted the link, so I want to go over to YouTube real fast and make sure it is in fact recording, because my big worry here is that we are not recording because I stopped and restarted. Let's come over here into the channel, and let's just make sure it says we are live now. So I will repost. Yeah, we're live right now. 1 second while I post this into the channel. Not sure why. All right, so there's that. That's torch, and we can get rid of this. So, all right. So now that we're back at the speed, so now one other additional thing I might want to do is I might want to add a little margin to the bottom of that H1 or the H2 rather. So we'll say margin bottom 1 rem, and that's much better for the spacing. But the main goal for Melanie that I wanted to make sure she had available to her is basically the grid setup and a little bit of guidance on that shadow. As shadows, when we tend to trip over ourselves, it's on something like the shadow. An additional thing that I think is important is if you've got a width that you're looking for on the section, you can set that right on the section, or you can wrap this section. You can say something along the lines of div class container, and then bring that down. I always like to clean up my indentions while I'm here. So, and then we could set say just on container. There's a few different ways you could write this. I typically write it to the something like width 800 pixels, or actually let's just do width at 90%, and then margin is 0 auto. That gets you centered up. This is really helpful for when you're getting out into mobile sizes. If I'm doing mobile, I typically do like 96%, so it's taking up almost the entire width of the shape that I'm in. And then as it comes out, I'll come back down here into my media query, and I'll adjust it further. And once I'm in the media query, it's like, hey, you know what, max, the width here is, I don't know, 80%. And now when we come wider, you can see it narrow. It's a narrow, and then it comes out wide when it's below that 768. So just a couple of different ways that you can look at that adjustment. when you're on a desktop size, it's pretty much like this. You could adjust this to go to one column a lot earlier. So you could say at 900, do it. So when it's out here, it's 2 columns. When it's below that, it's 1 column. So just something to keep in mind. I definitely wanted to make sure that that Melanie had a starter to go with as she's warming back up into code. But the real key is, once you begin creating these styles, you can turn them into components, and these components, that's the real trick. It's like we've always had styles, and now we're growing into components. We're just making Legos. This is a Lego. All right, this is one Lego that in this particular case she's going to use over and over again. So I really think it's helpful to have those starting points. And I also like taking things into CodePen and using them there, because when I get to work in CodePen, I get to see it without all the crap around it, and I get, if it breaks in my case study or if it breaks on my site, I tend to come to something like CodePen. I'm like, okay, let's sandbox this, because I want to make sure that when all the other stuff is removed, it's working. And if it's working here, that means that something in my site is impacting it negatively, and making it so something's wrong with my site. There's some other conflict. It's not this particular thing that I'm working on. So anyway, Melanie, that's for you. Let's come over to James. James, this is really his first submission into our second submission. He's done observational research. That came across great. Now he's moving into stakeholder interviews, and I think it's really key the questions that you ask as you're getting a project started. This is not so focused on just this particular project. It is about asking the right questions, getting started on the right foot when dealing with any new client. So while this is a task that appears under UX, and it is in fact research, this is really just due diligence when you're working with any client. So I think a lot of the questions that James you've asked, and I will go back and answer these individually. I always go back through and answer these one at a time. I won't bore us with those details here, but the types of questions that James is asking here are on point. What's your vision? That is a question that's trying to get into the client's head. Like, okay, you've called me in here, you want me to build this thing. What are you thinking, so that we can try to get on the same page? Can you provide a timeline? Like, are you trying, I want to know how much time you're thinking this is going to take. Asking them to provide a timeline is just getting them to talk to you and getting them to let you in on any potential secrets that you need to know about. That is not you agreeing to the timeline. Okay, so that's a big difference. How do the things differ? So in this project, you're dealing with 2 different brands. This is interesting because this project is based off of a existing company, and their all the stats and whatnot that are offered, the revenue numbers and things like that. That's all from a actual company. I've changed the names to protect the innocent. Do you offer any loyalty services? Please describe the limitations of your current operation. Like, this is about getting them to talk to you about how they perceive what they have right now. Knowledge of the staff. If successful, could you see expanding? Give an example of an existing service. What are you, this question is really, what are you as a stakeholder looking at that inspired you to make the move that you're making? And then what are the pain points of the current deli experiences? The question I haven't seen asked here, and it's pretty important: what does success look like? what, if this comes off, like you've asked the if successful, what's the next step? But the question, James, the question you haven't asked is, what does success look like? And that's an important question. Another important question is, what would constitute complete? Like, is this project complete when I'm done with the research? Is this project complete when it's shipped? Or is this project complete 6 months after initial launch? Like, when is this project finished? When is my task here done? You want to set up very clear guidelines for what the finish line is, because my worry in these cases always is that the goalposts move back, move back, move back, move back, and then getting to the finish is nearly impossible because the client continues to move. And also that often comes down to, do you have the ability to actually finish the project? This is where how payments are initiated come into play. A lot of projects are, you get paid after the project is done, and then it's 30, 60, 90 days after that that you collect. You don't want to set yourself up in a situation where you're never getting paid. So asking these questions early when you're talking with the stakeholder is helpful. And then ultimately it really comes down to, how long are we working on it? What does success look like? And then what could we do next? I think most of your questions here are spot on, James. I'm going to go through here and answer these after the call. But overall, I think you're on the right path. But be sure to ask, what does success look like? All right, Kara's got she's got flow map here, and her flow maps, her user flows. Kara, I think these are really pretty well done. I like that I have an idea of where this is starting and also where it's going. The biggest problem that we have right now is I'm not sure what, aside from, I mean, I can guess that, like, okay, so this one is user is logging in. Okay. I have no, like, one issue here is I have no forgot password. Like, I have no password invalid and, like, path back to, yeah, good job, James. I have no path back to login. So I don't, these are all pretty happy flows. But the bigger issue is I don't know what task these flows are associated with. And this is something really easy to do when you're sitting down working through the flows, because you've got a list that you're working through. You know, whether you wrote it on a sheet of paper or you're going through your user stories, you're sitting here and you're like, okay, so I'm going to, so this is selecting a sample meal. I'm guessing because I see sample and I see sample. And then I get an option, and then I enter my shipping information, and I enter my payment information, and then place my order. I do like it that you tell me where you're going to wrap up. That's something that, like, I went back and forth with Eve last week, and I was like, she had end written here, and she said, oh, it's the dreaded ending. So you've done a good job of telling us where you're ending. You simply haven't labeled, like, what the flow is. And I'll take you over to Eve's for a second, because I think it's really important. She just brought in a shape. She got rid of the border on it and just typed in, I want to subscribe to a meal plan. And then, like, okay, so here's how we do that. All right. And there are a couple different, for her, there were a couple different ways to kind of do these. So there's some dotted lines going on. One thing I do like about this is Eve utilized some color here. So, like, green is where it starts, yellow is where a decision's being made, red is the end. So I think if you want it to, Kara, if you want to amp this up in just one other way, it might be to just add some color in here for the beginning and ending, and where you have some decision making happening. But overall, I think the big thing that I need is that I just need labels telling me what specific stories are being addressed. That's a very minor thing, but it's something that it comes down to how you collaborate with your teams. If you show this to your team, it may be fine because you're there with it and you're able to explain what's happening. But imagine that team member took this document and went to another group of people and said, okay, we got the flows. And then they sat down and they were like, I don't know what these flows are. And then they have to think, okay, what did Kara say the flow was? It's just a communication thing. These documents tend to go places where we're not always with them. Okay, so you want to label things as clearly as possible because you may not be able to ride along with every single document that people work through. So that's my 2 cents there. Just a little bit more work here. I think these are once I have the labels and I know exactly what you're working through, then I'll be able to go through and make probably a couple of suggestions. But overall, these feel like they're going in the right direction. And I also like the fact that you have a clear beginning and end to all of these, which tells me that when we do read through them, it's like, oh, and this is where and now they've placed their first order, or now they've saved an update. Whatever those flows are, that's you've ended them somewhere, and that's a big piece of this. Let's go ahead and hop over here. So this is Rebecca's, and again, sorry about the sound issue earlier. That was unfortunate. I sometimes move around with my machine, and I simply had forgotten to plug this big bad boy back into my computer. So I certainly do appreciate those of you that were following along this morning saying, hey, no sound. Chris, there's no sound on this. So this is Scylla Candy. It's like silicone, Scylla Candy. And I got to tell you, Rebecca, if you looked at this in its wireframe mode from a few days ago to now, I think that you probably are envisioning a radically different project than you have right now. It's much cleaner. I think the simplification of imagery that you've landed on makes it infinitely better. It just feels like a focused offering from a just a visual perspective. It's not overwhelming me with imagery. Obviously, you still have some work to do to tighten some of the stuff up so that you've got that familiar gap between them. But overall, I think I believe you're on the right path. I think that I really believe that a lot of this is going to be something that's cleaned up in CSS. Like there's some inconsistency with like the button styles. Like we got this pulled in as a component, but we didn't reuse it as we went. There's questions about the imagery, and particularly down here. And I'm not sure the going over the top is the right or wrong way to go about this. I'm mostly trying to figure out like where this goes. So like right now it's just all dragged off to the side. I could see a vision of this where let's just say view baking mats. Let's just take this one. I could see a vision of this where on highlight, you come through and you say, hey, I'm going to well, no, that didn't work very well. Now I'm going to say multiply. So I went darker. Okay, I purposely went darker, and now I'm going to say baking mats. And I'm going to make this larger, basically like this extra bold that you've got here. And I'm going to say like 30. And essentially, actually, you know what? I'll center this up just so it's consistent throughout. But here we go. And then this extra bold, I'll just put in white. Maybe I'll even make it 40. Like I'll make it huge. But you know, on hover, like the idea would be like this is normal. It goes a little darker, and then on hover, the name appears. You know, you could also say view baking mats. I don't think you want it to fill up at that point. Probably 30 is probably more like what you're looking for, because you do have, you know, like view aprons, whatever. I would keep these the same size though. So as you're coming through, I think just whatever depth this is, I would just apply it to all of them. So I wouldn't have varied sizes on these. But I could see like a hover sort of thing. You know, you could also go with the buttons, you know, to give you a target. That's fine. I don't think these shapes work very well. I think you've got to have something to hold it together. The only other option I could see here is to come back with like, hey, I'm gonna do this in the background. And now it you know, and we did this on another project where you used a color in the background to kind of give you that shape, and then you could come back with the color on hover. So this basically allows you to not put a overlay on the image per se, but you could do like a color, like do this thing when you hover over. But just a couple of options there, because it feels like right now that is unsolved with regard to your project. You had a specific question here about the top though, and the top was asking about images, and I think that, you know, you peeled back the pink, and I think in peeling back the pink, you allow us to see it a little better. Another thought that I have when I'm looking at this, and I'm going to just I'll duplicate this one because we've kind of already been we've already been messing around with the bottom of it anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this. And this is what we do here. We just wreck each other's projects. It's all right. Rebecca knows it's all love. So another thought here that I have is, what if we get that out of there? Let's put this in like a black. Okay, so that's down there, and yes, it's terribly dark compared to the other. That's regular. That's medium. That's why it's dark. I'm just gonna go with regular. And it seems like you probably have that's the label style. Yeah, I'm not sure where your styles are. So I'll leave that alone for a second. But my other thought here, Rebecca, is that what if you just pulled this in and, you know, took this bit of text, and instead of trying to slide everything on here, what if you just said, you know, meet Silicandy, and you said this is going to be 80, or maybe not 80, maybe 70. Meet Silicandy, and then let's come up with this in size. Maybe this is 32, and there it is. And then you come back with all of this. But in grid form. And what I mean by that is I would make this wide enough to where it feels like it could just continue down if you want it to. All right? If I was really being nuanced about it, I would even probably consider like notching it out just a bit, just to make it feel like it's, oh, this is an extension of the grid. And yeah, that's probably what I would do with it. That's just me though. But I think what that really allows you to do, it allows you to see the product. And that's what we've been fighting with this. There's just too much type on it. And I say that as I hear every photographer who ever saw me lay out a magazine back in like 2002, I hear them screaming at me right now. I hear them screaming at me because I would do this, and they would say, why are you putting so much type on the photo? And I apologize. I have sinned, and I am trying to repent at this moment. So that's what I would do. I would, to all of the photographers that I've hurt before, I would pull the typography off, and I would minimize the amount that I'm laying over the image. That's what I do. I swear. I'm sorry. Trust me. I hear young me saying, but I want it to be more graphical. Yes, I repent, Alfonso. I repent. I repent, photography gods. I repent. But these are the things. This is what happens when you grow as a designer over the years. You begin to see the mistake. You see the mistakes that you've made before, and then you try to offer up solutions that don't take any. I'm trying to save you. But here, the trick is, I think, Rebecca, this is probably your photo. I mean, you probably like snapped this, or it's definitely your product. So it's me helping you help you. But that's what I would do here. I would get, and you can look at it. Look at the progression. All right, this is very easy to see. So this is where we started at, right? And it was like, okay, so we've got the image. We can kind of see it, but this is what we've been going after the entire time. It's like, I can't really see the image. That's why you've got the fade over here. You're trying really hard to make it work, and then you pull back, okay? But it's really kind of hard to see the B and the about products and whatnot, because I've still got like there's just so much stuff commanding my attention. And then I come back and, this is really the same thing. Like all the changes that have happened here are below. But then we make this move. Okay? And I think that's the unlock. The unlock is, okay, can I get one bit of text here that allows me to see the rest of what's going on? Yeah, sure. Go ahead and adjust roll if you want to. That's fine. You could even, frankly, do this if you wanted to, and tie all that together as like a section, a module. But I regardless of what you do, that's where I would go with it. And you might sit here and say to yourself, okay, well, Chris, why didn't you just suggest that last time? And the answer is, this is all about chess. Okay, you make some moves, I make some moves. I didn't initially see this as a solution. Really, it was you moving from here to here that made me go, huh, what if we doot and did that? It's all about playing off of one another. And this is why iterative design is so important. I think we can get to better solutions, but we have to we won't immediately get there just through this. Had I just been reacting to this, I probably would have done something along the lines of, oh, well, we'll pull this up, and we'll move all that up here, and then we'll move all this down here, and it'll just be like a color banner. That'd be one way to solve it, but I think that this is far more interesting. So, iterative design for the win, kids. Yeah, and that's where I'm at with it today. I'm sorry we had to restart. I'm glad I could make people like James and Alfonso laugh this morning. But yeah, that's Feedback Loop. It's pretty fun to see all these projects moving in different directions. But that's all I got for the day. So I hope you're going to have a great Monday. I hope you're going to have a great week. I sent that note out last night to everybody who's enrolled in the UX program or in career mode. This is the big week to push. It's the week before Thanksgiving. Next week, things get blown up. Things get crazy. Make your big move this week. Wednesday is going to be a weekly workshop. Typography in Figma. Oh, let's do it. And then portfolio potluck. One last one before we get out of here for the month of November. And that's all I got. So without further ado, Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic Feedback Loop. Have a great rest of your day. See ya.